So thank you everyone for joining us for this Earth Repair Summit, and welcome to the Okanagan Worldview of Society, Today and Into the Future, a session given to us by Jeannette Armstrong. I'm Yael Zeligman-Merkuliev, your Zoom facilitator. And before we begin, everyone, if you can please put in the chat box where you're from, both currently joining and your motherland, so we can feel a hug of Mother Earth. As you're doing that, I'll give a short explanation so we're all on the same page. Please keep yourself muted at all times so we can all hear the speaker clearly. After this short intro, the chat box will be closed. You will only be able to chat with me, Yael, your Zoom facilitator, to allow everyone else maximum focus on what our speaker is bringing. If you have questions for our speaker, please write them to me in the chat, even as she's speaking, so you don't forget it. I will harvest the questions, and then at the end of our speaker's presentation, she'll answer as many of them as time allows. I'm now going to close the chat box, and I will put a short bio and website of our speaker for this session. Jeannette Armstrong, who's Cyclic Okanagan traditional knowledge keeper is associate professor in Indigenous Studies and Canada Research Chair in Cyclic mixing it with my husband's tribe. So Okanagan Philosophy at UBC Okanagan campus. Her short bio will be in the chat, and I'll put it again at the end. And Jeannette, if you could do us the honor with an opening blessing and then take it from there, please.
Why limlamt yayat eqala or kispachen timstimik tempula tit minimstit no asli kinsits paa kinsut limlamt kelmnimsam piptmih Jacob Haspiut or Gun Quinmin, Xpolquil Tapnak Eliminimsted, Halikaltum Hulapted. So I'm just also in that included all of you in the greeting to all the places that you are representing, that you're coming from, that you're watching from, and bringing you all together in this space, so that we could receive some of the words that I have to share in a good way from the Tamihu of our land here in the Okanagan, where I'm from, and so that also include myself in that request for attention from these Tamihu that are listening in today, and that I don't say anything wrong or break any rules that are here on our land by sharing some of these words in the intent for the Tamihu and their health all over these lands that all of you represent. We went. So I was hoping that before last week or the week 2 weeks ago, I was hoping I could share some sounds with you, but I'm not going to do that because I'm in mourning now. And so I'll just say that if anyone would like to share a short song to start with, that would be a good thing. If any one of you, very short, just so that we have those sounds going out.
I could just sing a verse of a Cherokee song.
That would be really, really welcome. Thank you.
When they are whole, when they are whole, when they are, oh, ho, 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 hey, ho, hey, ho, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I just wanted to greet everyone in a good way, and hope that all of the things that I have to share with you today are not taken in a way which is about, the work that we're doing here, but how they can move you forward in the works that you may be connected to, or the spheres of influence that you may have in this topic that is part of this dialogue that's going on in many different countries, and this particular one that we're on today. So I'm going to show you some of my people and use that to trigger some of the points that I want to share with you. So I'm going to share screen. So this is the greeting from our main 4 chiefs of our land that are the caretakers of our laws. And this is the black bear. His name is Skimquist. And the way that our knowledge and our laws are constructed here in the Okanagan, and for many Salish people, they come from those ones that you could, and probably in science, called keystone species that are part of our land, and they give us the tools and the knowledge to understand the things that we as human beings need to know to be able to do things in the right way. And so I was brought up to be a Sukwakwalula, which means a speaker for them, for the land. And I'm a fluent speaker of the high language of the Seal people, and I'm also a teacher in that. And I've spent many years working with our elders, understanding that, interpreting for them, and interpreting at our main spiritual ceremonies to communicate with these other relatives on the land, so that we continue in that work that we have as a responsibility in their world, in their landscape. So this is just a few words from our chiefs. There are 3 other chiefs that form the pillars of our laws, that give us the teachings about how we're to be as community, and how we're to be as family, and how we're to be as individuals, so that we would be in balance with them. So Waipiayat Limlimt Chiapala Chapkastik Squaqualam Kalmanimstit Itukuntim Iltumhula Lutisatella Wilhi still scale. So these words have been passed on. And all it's saying right now is thank you for coming to me, for the words that you're sharing with one another about the things that we put together for you. So on your lands, on our lands, before you arrived here as humans on this planet, we had these things worked out among us. So that's the first message, and I'm just going to move to the next slides here. And this is my granddaughter, some of my grandkids, and we're harvesting huckleberries, of course, there in the middle, and that's the salmon in our river. But one of the things that we know is that the way that we in our traditions are connected to the place that we're from is that we know that everything that is in place on these lands is knowledge. It's not just that they're there, it's that they are knowledge, and that knowledge is given by them about the specific place that we're in. And that's a real way to think about what Indigenous means, and why the different languages, why the different customs, and why the different cultures that are required by those living things that are there, and how they provide their gifts and their bounty to us. Our knowledge is constructed around that, is infused in our traditions, in our ceremonies, in our songs, in our dances, in all the things that we do and that we know as Indigenous people from a specific place. It's that place that has provided the language, the knowledge, the stories, all of those things that we do, even the things that we make, the things that are beautiful, that, that inform us, and the things that take us into those spiritual realms that we know about as Cyclic people, as Indigenous people. And so what does that mean? Our view, the view that I come from is, and I'm talking about the Seal people, that everyone in that place needs to know that place in the same Indigenous way in order for it to be healthy. So what does that mean? If everyone, and we're talking about all the settlers that have come to be part of our land and reside with us or next to us, our view is that everyone in that place needs to know that place in the same way that we know it. In other words, what does that place require from us in how we need to be, how we need to take care of it, how we need to connect to it. So that, in terms of looking at, is what my main focus is. And when I use the word to indigenize a place, it doesn't mean to have people take over our culture and do the things that we do and think that they can do all of the things that are, spiritual, ceremonial, and so on without the people from those places doing them. That's, I think, one of the things that is misunderstood about indigenizing. When I talk about indigenizing, is what do people need to know about the living things in the places they occupy, the places they reside? What are the laws that require a healthy balance with those living things? That's what we're grappling with now at this time. In the topic of this dialogue, how do we repair? How do we make those changes in our communities, in our ways of doing things? And how do we help, make for a healthier balance in all the smaller spheres that we each occupy as an individual, or as a family, or as a community, or as an organization? So that's what I wanted to start with, and I'm just going to move to the next slide. One of the things that I think about is this idea of celebrating what I'm going to refer to as the Tamich from this point on. And I'll give you a little bit of an explanation of that. These are all my community members. We're doing ceremonies out on the land in different places. That middle one is down in the Washington State side of my tribe. One is in the Wenatchee area. They're opening the spiritual door for the salmon harvesting on the Columbia River. And down below that is they're waiting for the canoes to arrive at the Kettle Falls landing, where they're going to do the ceremony of calling the salmon upriver back home to us. even though the Grand Coulee Dam is there and stops the salmon from reaching this point, but this ceremony had been going on for thousands of years, and it's still going on. So one of the things that we think about is tamih. That word for us is a way to think about how our understanding of our part in the land that we're from. If you think about the word itself, I'm just going to go into a short explanation. That idea of that idea of that mihu is really an important one, meaning that there's so many living things that are part of, that make up the land. And that last part, that XW in our language, identifies cyclic movement continuously, nonstop. And so when you think about what environment means, what land means, what ecology means, it's really not talking about the trees and the plants and the waters and so on. It's talking about all of the cycles that each of those living things go through from year to year, season to season, and birth and renewal and death and so on. So those cycles that have to continue is what tamih is. And so it's the living movement of life in the continuing cycles that form our seasons, our day and night, our yearly round. And so it's more than just thinking about environment, which is like a static idea of things, right? It's really theoretical in some ways in terms of what really is happening out there when you look at the land and when you think about that. And so that mystery of that continuing self-regeneration of that place is what the balance is, and what we in our language are paying attention to when we have these ceremonies, and when we use those ceremonies to put ourselves in that space where these living things hear what our intent is, and hear what our mind is, and hear what our commitment is, and hear what our actions are toward them, to maintain that cycle in a healthy balance. So that's how I understand even this calling ceremony here that my elder brother is the leader of. He calls the salmon every year upriver from the ocean, up the Columbia River, to come home to us, to come home to our place, even though we know that the Great Coulee Dam is there and they're not going to make it up there. But it puts in the mind of the people all standing here how they might work together to change that, how the living river with our salmon can be rebalanced into our world. And so that's what that I really wanted to start with in terms of looking at what do we mean when we're talking about our part in that, and as human beings in the restoration and rebalancing of the things that maybe we're not responsible for, but the human is responsible for. And we as human beings are part of that responsibility. So one of the responsibilities is the requirements of the tamih. What is that requirement? It's not a requirement of a species or a biological entity, but the requirement of that continuous regeneration. What what is required for those birds, those animals, those butterflies, those plants to continue regenerating. And so those relationships that are there and our use of those knowledges to maintain a relationship that isn't disrupting, that isn't damaging, that isn't destroying, is the requirement for us. It's the requirement that we have to be bound by, and that understanding that the place requires us to act within its reciprocity as a necessary part of our everyday living. We can't make exceptions. We can't make, that humans have a bigger right to, to be in that area and destroy everything. We can't make those kinds of assumptions and exceptions in the way we think about ourselves. And so it's a spiritual guiding force that helps us continuously to put ourselves in that place where we're understanding how equal we are within that system and how we have to maintain that egalitarianism within that system. And so from the time our children, this is one of my grandnephews there, and that's me with my brother there. He's doing the ceremony when we're going out to greet the land for the first things that are going to be coming up out of the land. And we do that every year. We bring our children out there, and so that we're not only doing it just to do the ceremony, we're doing it to make sure that people in our family have that inside of them as a necessary part of who they are, as a necessary part of their living on the land. And that as they grow up, that necessary part of that respect and that spirituality, which is different than religious, different than the kind of rituals you do, but the spirituality is that understanding of why this is necessary, why we're doing it, and why our children and our everyone that we're in contact with needs to have this inside of them. Just going to move to this other one. Just as an example, this is me and my daughter and my niece, my oldest niece there. And over here again, me and my daughter and one of my other nieces. We're out doing what we do every year with the plants on the land. And so one of my nieces is not well. She's experiencing, a lot of physical unwellness. And so part of our work is to make sure that she is able to go out there, because the land heals you in more ways than you can think about. It's not just that it gives you calmness and wealth, happiness inside, but there is a very definite reason that those things in the colors that they are, the sounds that they are, the smells that they are medicine, physically to us and emotionally to us and spiritually to us. So when we go out there and we hear those things, we smell those things, and we see those colors, they do things to realign ourselves internally, physically. And so that's really important for our people to know that's part of what our process is for helping each other and helping one another. But also when we're out there, we also provide a number of different ways in which the land benefits in that reciprocity from us. We know in our territory that if we're not out there harvesting, picking, digging, all of those things, that the land starts to deteriorate. It doesn't produce physically. It doesn't produce and regenerate itself. It needs us. We're part of that. We have been there doing those things, and it's adapted to our ways of being part of that land, and needs us to continue doing those things for its medicine from us. So that reciprocity isn't just one way. That reciprocity is for them as well. And the repair of those places require us to be out there, to be doing those things. So I'll just continue on to the next one. And so we know that the way in which we connect to those things, when they talk about harvesting people or people that are planting their corn or whatever it might be, or fishing or hunting or all of that, it's not just that we're benefiting by the healthy food, in terms of nutrition, but we're also creating and understanding that balance that has to be provided out there, that we were formed to be part of, that we were of that land in that interdependent way, and that we, in those connections, are who we are as human beings in those places. And so it isn't a tribal card, or it isn't a First Nation Indian Act card that makes you Indigenous. It's how we are as human beings in that place, and how that connection is understood and cared for and culturally incorporated into the way that we do things, in the way that we don't do things as well. That is the word Indigenous. Because when you really think about the word Indigenous, it's not describing a race, or it's not describing a political structure. Indigenous really describes that in that place, you're part of that interdependent adaptation to that place, so that, like if you were trying to plant an orchid in the Okanagan, it wouldn't survive, right? Because there are winters, and so the plants that are here have understood and learned about what climate, what soil, what winds, what rain is available, and they've shaped themselves to that. And as an Indigenous person, we know that we've been here at least 12,000 years, probably more, but 12,000 years is what we can identify in archaeological methods and linguistic methods. We know that over those 12,000 years, not only have we adapted in our knowledge systems, in our culture, in our ceremonies, in our ways of harvesting and living, but they have adapted to us through that time. So that reciprocity of Indigenous people and Indigenous practices is needed. So that I wanted to really bring that home. And again, that's my husband there and my daughter, and we're making some medicine there. So knowing the Tamihu in those areas as our generous ancestors, knowing them as our relatives, in other words. I just got to plug in here. Give me 1 second. Here. Knowing the places and the things that are there are like when you visit your favorite auntie or your favorite grandma or your favorite uncle, and they embrace you and they're so glad to see you, and then they give you their best cookies and milk or whatever to give you a treat, And so when we go out to these places with our families, and those are some of our family pictures there, we celebrate. We feel that embrace. We feel that ancestral care. And I have been out on that land with my grandmother who's been passed away since the 1970s, you know, and with my aunties who passed away in the 90s, and my mother who passed away in early 2000. But when I go out there, I see them, because these are the places we did these things. These are the places we camped. These are the places we picked. These are the places we dug. These are the places where we hung a deer, or, you know, whatever, all of those things. And so they come back there with us, and we know what their care and their love and how they felt loved, and we bring that inside of us. And so anybody that's going to hurt that land or destroy that land is going to see us standing out in front of them and saying, no, you're not going to do that, because they're hurting our ancestors. They're hurting those living things that are our relatives, that take care of us. So the Tamihu are the providers of our caretaker knowledge for the areas we live in. And it becomes really difficult and really hard when you love the land that way. And that's what everybody in this planet needs to have inside of them. Everybody needs to have that inside of them, not just Indigenous people and the people that ally with them, that stand out there, because that feeling is burning inside of them when they do that in the middle of the winter, in the middle of the harshest things happening. Every single person in the planet needs to have that inside them, so that that health and that balance is there. In looking at some of the things, just for example, this middle picture there, all these elders working with a group of young women who are, you could say, apprentices, fully in our language and our knowledge out there in these places that are being guarded. The root fields in the Okanagan are really important for the women, and the berry picking fields. We go out there every year to do the ceremonies and to do the digging, and we provide those at all of our main feasts and our winter dance ceremonies, our spiritual ceremonies. And when people are out on the land, when they're out there seeking spiritual guidance out on the land, that's the first thing we feed them when they come in. From that is the roots of the land, because in our teachings, to be rooted to the land is to draw everything you need from that land. That is the teaching that tells us that we as human beings need to be rooted to the places we're in over generations, so that we can have that knowledge, we can have that care, we can have that understanding as to how we need to be in that. We can't be transient, you know, and love the land in the way that we need to love the land as whole communities or whole extended families. And so the teachings from our root chief, Spitlam, tells us how to do that, tells us through its laws that this is something that's extremely important for us, and that the women's responsibility for the rootedness to the land is part of who we are, because we bear the next generations, and we nurture the next generations in their earliest years to do that and to see that. That's me and my granddaughter there. So when we think about that as well, on the flip side of it, we're also helpers to the land's productivity itself. Annually, we go out there and we work on our dry land, because our land forms a crust on it here in the Okanagan in the summer. It's really very, very hot. And so there's not a lot of opportunity when those seeds fall to take root. So part of our work every year is to go to these places where we know, and to rotate those places that we know that have to be dug, that have to have, holes in the ground so those seeds will have a place to land and so on. So we do work with other partners like Nature Trust and a number of other environmental organizations to make sure that we can do that in those lands, that we go in there to do our harvesting that the plants require from us, and that we take care of the lands in the way that we're supposed to take care of, and that's something that can be partnered and really makes for strong alliances with partners that are trying to do the same thing, but without Indigenous people involved in it, without Indigenous partnering and the harvesting that's required and the knowledge that's required in those places. So what we call the Tamihu Laws, we're part of the organization that in Okanagan and UBC, where I work at. We're working at making sure that the next generations of children that live here are introduced to those laws, are introduced to that feeling. And we have programs in which 60, 70, 80 schools come to look at the places we're doing restoration in, or that we're taking care of, and many other university and high school students come out there, but mainly we try to bring them out as young as possible. So not just to be lectured to, but to do the things out there to help the land, whether it's restoring or whether it's reseeding or whether it's collecting seeds or whether it's work in the fishery in which we're replenishing the salmon, so that those kin relationships get formed between the human and the land that they live in. And it doesn't matter about color or race or anything like that. It's not about, esoteric knowledge or ceremonies. It's about actually going out there and doing things on the land and putting the land inside of them for the health of that place. And so we also think about water in that same way, that water is a path for us to become that place, for us to be at home in that place, to be indigenous to that place. And I'm saying indigenous in the way that I described it. And so a lot of our work, this is my brother in the middle there, my nephew, and some of the tribal leaders from about 4 or 5 different tribes that come there every year to do these water ceremonies. That's my granddaughter standing there on the side. And these are my grandsons. They're salmon fishing at what was below the dam at McIntyre. That dam has now been revised and the salmon can get over that dam. So a lot of the work that we do in the offerings and the prayers is not just about acknowledgement. It's about the commitment to make a change where we can to help that river, which is the salmon. There's no such thing as a salmon without a river around it. So it's the river we're talking about. And because the salmon itself can't exist, and the river itself, it needs to be what is restored and what is worked on. So that's a real important understanding. But to bring that water inside of you in that particular way, to know that place, to know that river, and to connect spiritually with it, is really an important aspect of our people in terms of the way that we think about water and rivers. So one of the things is one of our Okanagan, because the Okanagan sockeye salmon had disappeared from the Okanagan River system by all the dams in the U.S. side, 14 dams, stopping them from coming, back into our territory for over 50 some years. So putting them back into the river, the prayers and the ceremonies aren't just about, talking to them. It's about the actions we have to do, the actions that we can do. So the 8 seal communities in our Okanagan Nation here were consulted by Okanagan Nation Fisheries for their traditional knowledge advice, and to take that traditional knowledge and integrate it into the way they make decisions. And what was really interesting when they sat down is the community elders. My uncle was one of them. My mother was one of them when they were still alive. They said, it's not just about the technical things you need to do to restore the salmon. You need to restore the ceremonies, and you need to do it in a way that includes the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and the public utilities districts that are making those dams. You need to bring them to the ceremonies. You need to feed them the salmon and feed their spirits about what the river is. You know, they're not your, if you keep them as enemies, them dams are not going to change. Them rivers not going to change. You need to include them, so that put it in their hearts and inside of them, in their spirits, what they can do and what they have to do. So that was really an important teaching in terms of how this is now their first time back up in Okanagan Falls, where they weren't for, like I said, over 60 years. This is the first run back there. So this is our people in terms of collaborating. The ceremonial leaders and the community tech holders, they integrated all their collaborations with wider community. All levels of federal government, provincial government, and state governments were included in terms of the technical works, but also they had to be there in the ceremonies. And all the biologists had to learn our ceremonial traditions in working with them. And this is a scene in which all the children from all the surrounding schools take part in releasing the baby salmon that have been collected, by the Okanagan Nation as eggs and hatched, and then they're released back into the river again. That's being done every year by all the schools in the area. So all those children from all of those schools are going to be connected to the Okanagan River salmon. And that's all children. It's not just Indigenous children that are part of that, because our land, they're on our land. They need to have the land inside of them if they're going to care about it, if they're going to defend it, if they're going to change policies, around it. So that's really an important, I think, part of the idea that we have in terms of in terms of success stories. This is a really an important success story. That population was one of the 3 remaining Columbia River stocks of sockeye salmon, and they were down to 3,000 in the mid-90s when this chief, who was my cousin, Chief Albert Saddleman, said, we got to put them back. Talk to the communities, talk to the spiritual people, talk to the ceremonial leaders, talk to the the elected leaders. And so that's what they did. And by 2010, the restoration, raising them and releasing them and have all the communities involved in it. Now now it's over way more than that, 200,000 in 2010. It's like in the millions now that are returning. That now makes up to 90% of all the Columbia River sockeye. So that's what one nation can do if they're including all the people that live on their lands. And it's really, I think, an important, understanding that can be brought to anything. That's what Leroy Little Bear and them are doing in terms of the Buffalo Treaty out on the plains, in terms of working with all the different national parks and tribal entities that can come together, and all the different levels of government and funding agencies that can come together, to put their mind to how that can be restored. So we can do this as humans. We are able to do this. So this is one of the last slides that I have. That idea we call bush schooling, bringing people out to the land and talking with the indigenous people and planning with them and supporting with them, and having them as leads in these different areas. These are our people in 2 different bush school areas. So we have 8 of them that we're working on as an Alkin Center, and through my role as UBCO, supporting the work that they're doing. And the restoration isn't just for the salmon. There'll be all these other areas like the caribou and the grizzly bear and the elk corridors that need to be restored. So we have a model that the young people, are engaged in, and that helps heal them, and that helps our people move toward a better way of working with others that live in our territories. So that's the last slide, and I'll stop sharing at this point.
Thank you so much.
So I think
That was
there was going to be some questions that our host was going to look at.
functions. We didn't see. Okay, I do have a question. Penny, do you want to unmute and maybe just say your question?
Yes, first of all, I want to say thank you. What a lovely model. I'm so excited to hear about this. Second, I know that there's that nuclear power plant at the beginning of the Columbia River. How is that affecting things, and what's happening with that?
I know that the lower Columbia tribes would have more information about that. We're very far up. We're in the Upper Columbia tribes in Canada. In the Canadian part is where I'm at, in British Columbia. And so the Upper and Lower Columbia tribes have more information about that. I think in terms of my understanding might be limited, but the plume that was there, that was detected, they're monitoring what the radiation levels would be in the bigger salmon, the Columbia, the salmon that are more closer to the mouth of the outlet to the ocean, because salmon don't eat when they come up, but they can be affected by any of the plume of the radiation that might be in the river. But I don't have enough information about that, or have anything to do with how the Lower Columbia River tribes might know more and understand more about what is being done related to that. But the salmon are monitored in terms of how they may be affected.
Thank you. And Victoria has a question. Do you want to unmute?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for that beautiful perspective. So I have a garden in our backyard, and I think about, well, how could this be shared, or with, say, master gardeners, or with others who have a garden in their backyard, and how could we bring that into our little plot of land, what you're talking about?
That's really a good question. My husband and I did some workshops with the Center for Eco-Literacy, and part of that idea of that's in Berkeley. And we went down there to help with looking at how our model of those 4 laws, those 4 chiefs of balancing opposites, could help them rework how they were doing their program. And so when we went down there to do those workshops, one of the workshops had to do with that question similar to that, and that idea of how communities might be engaged. And part of it had to do with the restoration of this small creek that went through an area that needed to be restored. So how many people who owned land that were, that were resident on that creek could be engaged in that process and through their children in this school? Yeah. And it was really a successful working, what was it called again? The Stemple Creek Project. We went back 20 years later to look at what was done, and it was just amazing work. And so what they did was work with all the different people in a larger context and mapped out all the areas where they could, in a sense, rewild or restore all of the natural, life forms that were there, and other areas where they could still maintain, gardening or other agriculture or other things that wouldn't, that isn't destructive to that, to that work that they were planning. And so it was a whole system kind of plan. And I think that's one of the things that can be done. Like if you have a block of people that would look at gardening in a different way for less water or for pollinators or, specific things you could accomplish with five neighbors, for instance, and create a project that, that could be a model. Those are the kinds of things I think that people can do in terms of repairing the land and repairing the life forms that are, part of that land. And of course, there's some places where you can't do that because of, the city regulations and all of that. But there are places where that can be done.
Yeah, or just even bringing the deeper perspective that you have to people who care for the land. Yeah, thank you. So is there that webinar or that whatever? Is there more information that I could access about that? Or
well, we do have the Okanagan Center. I'm on their board. I'm not I'm not employed there. I'm at the university. But the Okanagan Center is the center that's working with the Bush School concept and putting that in place. And I know that they have a really beautiful restoration project as one of the Bush School sites. They rewilded one part of the river, which had been just straight channel, right? And they rewilded. They bought the land. They had to raise money, and they had, of course, had to have donors help purchase the land, return it back to the community, so it's community owned. And they rewilded that. So they greenhouse plants that, that all the schools and all the, community members that wanted to come to help replant that area. It was just a wasteland. There was nothing there. And now you should see it. It's just beautiful. They have a website for that.
Wonderful.
I don't have it right here in front of me, or else
okay.
I put it
Thank
in
you.
the chat box.
Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
But it's called Ecomunity. If you look at
Ecomunity.
ECCUMMUNITY. And I think there's the special website is ecomunity.com.
Okay. Oh, that's very helpful. Thank you so much.
And it's specific to that restoration site, but it's meant to mean that there's a community that's involved in doing that, all of that work, with the schools, with the children, with volunteers from the seniors, because they really love it. They like to come out and spend time, doing that work, and they need to do that work. It's something that's really needed that feeds their spirit, along with the children from the different schools and so on. So it's a project that's really, really liked by the communities.
Yeah, mutual healing. Yeah, thank you so much.
This is just about all the time we have before the next session. Maybe you can put the Ecomunity in the chat box so people could look it up.
I'll see if I can find it.
Also, if you have your own website, in case people want to connect and learn more, that would be great. And for all of you, thank you for joining. If you want, the chat box now is open if you want to offer some words to our speaker. And thank you so much. I'm not gonna attempt again your native name, but thank you, Jeannette. It's been an honor and a privilege.
Thank you very much.
And we'll see you at the other meetings.
I'm going to see if I can. I can't find the website here. I'm just trying to find it. No, I can't. Oh, right here. I found it. Let's see. I'll put it in the chat box in just a second here. There. Sorry. Took me a couple of minutes.
Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Thank you all so much. It was a real pleasure sharing that with you today.
It was a
Lim-
pleasure to have you share with us so generously. How do you say thank you in your language?
I just said it, Limlim, Piayat, all of you. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you
on
so
to the
much.
next sessions, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Yael. That was wonderful hosting. I really enjoyed it.
I really enjoyed your teachings. Thank you, Elder.
Bye-bye.
Bye.